the heart of this nation, under skies so blue,
there's a spirit that's stirring, values strong and true.
from the mountains to the prairies, from the cities to the sea, we stand for liberty, for faith and family. We're diving deep into the heart of what we believe.
All right, so you've sent us some really interesting stuff about this concept of lawfare.
Yeah.
This idea that you can basically use the legal system itself as like a political weapon, which is
Pretty wild.
yeah, kind of wild when you think about it.
Yeah.
We're going to be diving deep today into a document simply titled Lawfare and Political Warfare Against Trump.
Okay.
And this thing makes some bold claims.
It does, yeah. This source is, it's interesting because it goes beyond just saying like someone broke the law. It's saying that the legal processes themselves are kind of like being manipulated to achieve political goals.
It really paints a picture of how, I mean, you can damage someone's reputation. You can just tie them up in court forever.
Yeah.
Maybe even prevent them from running for office. Like it's, the source is pretty intense.
It is.
So what does this source say like lawfare actually looks like, in practice? What are they saying?
Well, they define it as using legal processes like lawsuits, investigations, even impeachment to achieve political goals. So, it's like turning the courts and legal systems into a battlefield instead of like a neutral space.
So it's not even really about whether someone actually committed a crime.
Right.
It's more about, are they using the legal actions to inflict damage?
That's what they're arguing. And specifically, they talk about former President Trump.
Okay.
They say he's a prime example, and they point to a bunch of legal challenges that are trying to keep him off the ballot in the future, arguing that his actions around January 6th, it amounted to insurrection.
I've heard that term thrown around so much, insurrection.
Yeah.
Like, what does it actually mean, legally speaking?
Legally, it means like a violent uprising against the government.
Wow.
Which is obviously pretty serious.
Yeah.
And has specific things you have to prove legally.
Right.
But the source is claiming that these lawsuits, even if they don't succeed, are designed to just cast doubt on Trump's eligibility and discourage voters.
Is that like challenging someone's eligibility based on the 14th Amendment? Is that a common tactic? I got to be honest, I'm not that familiar with that.
So the 14th Amendment does say that someone who engaged in insurrection can't hold office, which is pretty significant. And the source is saying that using it against a former president is unprecedented. Which, that could set a new precedent for future elections.
Yeah, and that's what's so significant about all this.
Exactly.
It's like if the source is right, it really does affect how we view future elections.
Absolutely.
And how we view the people running and their legitimacy. And you said that's just one example, right?
Yeah, just one. They also list a whole bunch of investigations into Trump's businesses.
Oh, right.
His taxes, potential obstruction of justice, all sorts of things.
But, I mean, couldn't you argue that some of that, like investigating potential financial crimes, that's just like regular law enforcement?
You could.
No matter who's in office.
Yeah, and that's where things get tricky because the source is arguing that even those legitimate legal processes can be part of a lawfare strategy if the motive is political rather than, actually pursuing justice.
So you got to be able to prove their motive.
Well, yeah, but that's super hard.
Right. How can you be sure what someone's actual motivation is for going after someone legally?
Yeah, exactly. That's one of the big challenges in like identifying lawfare because it often comes down to interpretation and how things are perceived.
Not hard evidence.
Right. Not like a smoking gun.
So we've got those challenges to his candidacy, and then we've got all these investigations into his business dealings. Is that the extent of what they consider lawfare in this source?
Oh, no, there's more.
Okay.
They also point to the January 6th Commission as like a key part of this.
But I mean, that was a real event, the attack on the Capitol.
Of course.
It seems like there would be legitimate reasons to investigate that.
Yeah, for sure.
Even if there were like political motivations involved.
This is what makes it so complex, right?
Yeah.
Determining if an investigation is really about justice or if it's being used as like a political weapon is almost impossible sometimes.
Right.
This source claims that the findings of the commission were then used to fuel this narrative about Trump being unfit for office.
I see.
Which they argue then gave support to some of the legal challenges.
So it's less about the investigation itself and more about how they use the findings.
Right.
Okay, so what else do they say about how this lawfare is being used?
Well, the Mar-a-Lago raid and the whole legal battle over the documents, they claim that's another example of, the administration like overstepping its bounds to build a case against Trump.
Which, of course, the administration denies.
Right, totally.
They say it was a legitimate law enforcement action to protect national security.
And again, you have this clash of interpretations. It's really hard to know for sure whose motives are, pure and whose are political.
Right. So they're basically saying that all these legal actions, whether it's the Mar-a-Lago raid or the January 6th commission, it's all being framed in a way that benefits the current administration politically.
That's the argument, yeah.
Okay, so it's like everyone involved is just looking for evidence to confirm their existing beliefs, whether they like Trump or hate Trump.
That's a good way to put it.
And the source, they claim it's not just at the federal level either.
Right.
They point to the state level too, like what's happening in New York.
Yeah, they specifically mention the investigations and prosecutions going on in New York State.
Focused on his business practices, right?
Exactly. The Manhattan District Attorney's Office has been going after Trump for,
years.
Years, yeah. Can you remind me, what does a district attorney actually do?
Yeah, so a district attorney is an elected official who basically represents the state.
Okay.
In criminal cases within their jurisdiction. So in this case, Manhattan DA is pursuing charges related to Trump's business practices.
And the source is arguing that those state-level actions, they're all part of a broader strategy to keep Trump tied up in legal battles.
Which, of course, Trump and his legal team, they say it's politically motivated.
Of course.
They call it a witch hunt.
It just highlights that we're dealing with accusations and interpretations rather than facts.
It's like a big game of political chess.
It is.
Each side is making strategic moves, trying to outmaneuver the other, and these legal challenges are just one piece of it all.
One piece, yeah.
And, it sounds like these legal challenges are just one piece of the puzzle.
Right.
This source argues that the 2 impeachment trials against Trump are also relevant. Okay, remind me. He was impeached twice, right?
That's right.
Once while he was still president.
Yep.
And then again after January 6th.
Exactly. So the first impeachment, it focused on allegations of abuse of power and obstruction of Congress, all related to his dealings with Ukraine.
Right.
And then the second impeachment, that was for inciting the insurrection at the Capitol.
And he was acquitted both times.
Yeah, both times. The Senate acquitted him.
But this source suggests that the trials themselves, even without a conviction, they served a political purpose.
Exactly. They're arguing it was more about damaging his reputation, making him look unfit for office than actually getting justice.
This lawfare concept is getting, more and more interesting the more we learn about it.
It is fascinating.
What else does this source say about how it's being used against Trump?
One of the last things they bring up is security concerns.
Okay.
The potential threats to Trump's safety because of how, how intense the political climate is right now.
Wait, are they saying there have been actual assassination attempts?
No, they don't go that far. They just emphasize that all the heated rhetoric and the divisions, they've created this climate where people are really concerned for his safety.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Which has led to, increased security and all that.
But even if there haven't been any actual threats, just that feeling of danger can be powerful, right?
Absolutely. And the source argues that this fear, even if it's not based on anything concrete, can be used strategically.
How interesting.
It creates this whole narrative of victimhood, which then, rallies his supporters who feel like he's under attack.
So just the perception of being targeted.
Exactly.
Even without proof.
Can be part of this bigger lawfare strategy.
Right, okay.
And they also bring up how the media plays into this.
Right, because if the media keeps portraying someone as constantly under legal attack, it affects public opinion regardless of the facts.
Exactly. And this source claims that the media coverage often leans in favor of, the current administration.
Okay.
And contributes to a very one-sided portrayal of all these legal battles.
It's like a feedback loop.
It is.
The accusations of lawfare then get amplified by the media and it just feeds on itself.
Right.
How is anyone supposed to know what to believe?
That's a huge problem. We're in a world now where information can be used as a weapon so easily that we have to be really good critical thinkers.
We have to be able to,
Yeah.
figure out the biases, evaluate our sources.
And consider multiple perspectives before we decide what we think is true.
It's like we need to be lawfare detectives,
I like that.
gathering the clues,
Yeah.
examining the evidence, and figuring out what's really going on.
That's a great way to think about it.
Okay, so this source has laid out a lot of accusations about how this lawfare has been used against Trump.
It has.
But what are the bigger implications here? What does this mean for our political system as a whole?
That's the question we really need to grapple with.
If lawfare is as widespread and effective as this source claims, what does that mean long term?
What are the consequences?
That's what I'm really curious about.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we're going to get into next time.
Okay, looking forward to it.
When we continue this deep dive.
So we just finished exploring some pretty serious accusations about how legal tactics, how they can be used for political gain.
Right.
This source claims that Trump has been like a prime target of this lawfare. And it's got me thinking, like, what does this mean for, the average person who's just trying to, participate in politics?
Right.
Maybe even run for office.
Well, that's one of the things that is troubling about lawfare, right?
Yeah.
Is that it can have a chilling effect on political participation.
Oh, okay.
If people see that the legal system is being used as like a political weapon,
Right.
they might be less likely to, speak out, get involved, even run for office.
Yeah, I can see that, especially if they think they'll be targeted.
Exactly.
I actually, I've read a story recently
Oh, yeah.
about there was this local activist,
Yeah.
and she was like hit with this lawsuit after she criticized this powerful developer, and it made me think, was she targeted to just shut her up?
It's a perfect example of how the fear of legal retaliation can really discourage people from, using their rights.
Makes sense.
And the source argues that that's exactly what those engaging in lawfare, that's what they want. They want to silence their opposition and discourage anyone from challenging them.
It's disturbing, really. Like, if people are too afraid to even participate, what does that do to our,
To democracy.
Yeah, to democracy.
Well, it really undermines it. A healthy democracy relies on open debate, diverse perspectives, and, the ability of citizens to hold their leaders accountable.
We've got to be able to do that.
Exactly. And when fear and legal threats stifle that participation, it weakens our ability to even have a dialogue.
Right.
And, find solutions.
Yeah, it's not even just about citizens feeling intimidated.
Yeah.
This source also says lawfare can, damage people's trust in our institutions.
Right. Absolutely. When people start to see the legal system as rigged, or biased, it undermines their faith in the whole system.
The rule of law.
Exactly.
It's like that saying,
is it?
Justice must not only be done, but it must also be seen to be done.
I like that.
If people don't believe the system is fair, it doesn't matter what the outcomes are.
That's right. Perception is really important.
Yeah.
And this source argues that lawfare takes advantage of that perception by creating this narrative of victimhood and injustice.
It doesn't even matter if the legal cases are, actually legitimate.
Right. That's the scary part.
So we were talking about loss of trust, a chilling effect on participation. Are there any other consequences of lawfare that we should be thinking about?
Well, the source also highlights another concern, which is just the massive drain on resources and energy that all these legal battles create.
Oh, all those lawyers' fees?
Yeah.
Court costs, investigations, it's going to be a ton of money.
And time and effort.
Yeah, no wonder Trump is always saying this stuff is bankrupting him.
Right. And it's not just about the money either. All these battles, they divert attention and resources away from governing and solving real problems.
So it's like our political system is stuck in this, like a tug of war, where the only people who are winning are the lawyers.
That's a great analogy.
And the source says that this constant legal conflict, it just adds to the polarization and division in society.
Yeah, when people see the legal system being used to attack their opponents, it just reinforces their existing biases and makes it harder to find common ground.
It's like a, what is it?
What?
With us or against us mentality, where compromise just doesn't even seem possible.
We're so busy fighting each other that we forget about the bigger picture.
Exactly.
The need to solve problems and find solutions that work for everyone.
So this lawfare, it's weaponizing the legal system. Not just to target individuals, but to make our divisions worse.
And undermine our ability to, function as a society.
So it's not just about Trump.
Right.
It's about like the long-term damage to our political system and our society.
Our social fabric.
We're talking about loss of trust, increased polarization, a government that's too busy with lawsuits to actually help people.
Yeah, that's a pretty accurate summary of the concerns surrounding lawfare.
It's not just a theory. It has real consequences.
Real-world consequences, and they can be far-reaching.
This is kind of bleak, to be honest.
It is a bit.
Are there any, benefits to lawfare? Any arguments in its favor?
Good question.
Is it ever justified?
It's a tough one, and it's something that, legal scholars and ethicists, they debate it all the time.
Okay.
Some people argue that if there's clear evidence of wrongdoing,
Yeah.
especially by powerful people who might otherwise escape accountability,
Right.
then using legal means to go after them is warranted, even if there's, some political motivation involved.
So it's like balancing the need to hold people accountable
Right.
with the potential for abuse and the weaponization of the legal system.
Exactly. It's a balancing act, and there's no easy answer.
Right.
Each case has to be looked at individually,
Yeah.
You have to consider the evidence, the motivations, the potential consequences.
It seems like it would be really hard to, draw that line.
It is.
How can you be sure when the legal system is being used fairly versus when it's being used to, achieve political goals?
That is the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
There's no easy answer. It requires us to be vigilant, to think critically, to be aware of the potential for abuse,
Yeah.
question the narratives that we're being given,
Right.
and demand transparency and accountability from those in power.
So we can't just be passive,
No.
Just assume that the legal system will always be fair.
We have to be engaged, informed participants in our democracy.
Right.
And that includes, understanding how the legal system can be used for good or bad.
So if we, zoom out even further,
Okay.
how might lawfare affect future elections?
That's a big question.
If this source is right
Yeah.
and this trend continues, what should we be prepared for?
Well, if it becomes a standard tactic, it could have major consequences for how we campaign, how we vote, how we govern.
So it's not just about individual cases or politicians.
No, it's bigger than that.
We're talking about it reshaping the entire landscape.
Exactly. And this source suggests some of those changes could be pretty bad.
Okay, like what?
Well, one thing they predict is even more negative campaigning.
Oh, great, more attack ads.
Right. If candidates are afraid of being targeted with lawfare, they might be more likely to just attack their opponents first.
So it's like a race to the bottom.
Yeah.
Everyone's trying to dig up dirt and use the legal system to their advantage.
It creates this vicious cycle where trust and civility just keep eroding.
Yeah.
And the focus shifts away from actual policies and ideas to just attacking each other and exploiting the legal system.
It sounds like a system where everyone loses.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, so more negative campaigning. What else?
Well, they also talk about foreign interference.
Wait, how does lawfare tie into that?
Well, imagine a foreign government trying to, influence an election.
Okay.
They could use these divisions and legal vulnerabilities to cause chaos and undermine our faith in democracy.
So it's like they're using our own system against us,
Exactly.
making it even harder to know what's true.
That's the danger. Lawfare creates these weak points that can be exploited.
Okay, so negative campaigning, foreign interference, anything else?
The source also raises the concern that it could lead to a more, cautious, risk-averse political class.
What do you mean?
If potential candidates see what's happened to Trump,
Yeah.
they might be less likely to run.
Seriously, they've got skeletons in their closet?
Exactly. So we could end up with fewer choices on the ballot,
Yeah.
less diversity of voices.
It creates a barrier for anyone who's not already part of the system.
Right. Or who doesn't have the resources to fight these legal battles.
It's pretty sobering, to think about all the consequences.
It is.
Not just for Trump, but for everyone,
the whole system.
for democracy itself.
Yeah. This source has given us a lot to think about.
It has. I feel like I've gone down the rabbit hole here,
Me too.
but I'm glad we're having this conversation.
It's important.
It's a lot to process, but I feel like I understand lawfare so much better now,
I think so too.
how it works, and what's at stake.
Yeah, and it's not just about the legal battles themselves.
Right.
It's about the cultural impact.
The social impact.
Lawfare preys on our anxieties, fuels our divisions, and distracts us from the real issues.
So what can we do about it?
That's the question.
Is there any way to push back against this lawfare and protect our democracy? Is there any hope?
There's always hope. It's not a lost cause.
Okay, good.
There are definitely steps we can take, both individually and as a society, to fight back and build a more resilient democracy.
I like the sound of that. Let's take a quick break.
Okay.
We'll dive into those solutions when we come back. So we've spent a lot of time talking about this concept of lawfare.
Yeah.
And it can be a little unsettling, to think about how legal tactics can be used for political purposes.
Yeah, for sure.
This source, it paints a pretty, a pretty bleak picture of what could happen.
It does.
And not just to individuals like Trump, but to our whole political system.
Right. But it's not hopeless.
Okay, good. So what can we actually do about it?
Well, as individuals and as a society, there are actually things we can do to fight back against lawfare and protect our democracy.
Where do we even begin? Like, what can everyday people do to combat something as complex as lawfare?
Well, the first step is being informed.
Okay.
We need to understand how lawfare works, what the warning signs are, and be able to tell the difference between legitimate legal processes and those that are being abused for political reasons.
So we need to educate ourselves and not just believe everything we hear.
Exactly. Especially nowadays with how fast information spreads.
Right.
We need to be critical thinkers, look at our sources carefully, and try to get different perspectives.
So it's like we need to become lawfare detectives.
I like that.
Right. Looking for clues, weighing the evidence, and then deciding for ourselves.
Exactly. We need to be active participants, not passive consumers.
Okay, so we've got to sharpen our lawfare detective skills. What do we do next?
Well, once we're informed, we can start demanding better from our leaders and from our institutions.
So holding them accountable for upholding the rule of law.
Right, making sure the legal system is used fairly.
And not as a political weapon.
Exactly.
So that means things like contacting our representatives, speaking out against abuses of power, supporting organizations that, fight for transparency,
absolutely,
judicial independence.
Those are all great ways to, make our voices heard.
And advocate for a more just legal system.
Exactly.
What about campaign finance reform?
That's a big one.
Because if rich people and special interests can just spend unlimited money on lawsuits,
it creates an uneven playing field.
It makes it harder for regular people to, have their voices heard.
Exactly. The less money in politics, the less incentive there is to abuse the legal system for profit or power.
Okay, what about the judges themselves?
Oh, that's crucial.
How can we make sure they stay impartial?
We need to advocate for a strong and independent judiciary.
Okay.
So that means supporting fair selection processes for judges, protecting them from political pressure, and speaking out when we see attacks on their independence.
So they can make decisions based on the law without being afraid of political backlash.
Exactly. They need to be able to do their jobs without fear of reprisal.
And finally, I guess one of the hardest things is how do we rebuild trust in our political system?
That's a tough one. It feels like everyone is just, stuck in their own bubbles.
Yeah.
The level of animosity is it's so high.
But we've got to find a way, right?
We do. It's not impossible.
Okay.
We have to bridge the divides, start talking to each other, focus on common ground, even when we disagree.
Because this lawfare, it feeds off that division.
It does.
That distrust.
If we want to fight it, we need to change how we talk about politics.
So it's not about, silencing people we disagree with, but about listening to each other.
Creating a space for different perspectives.
And having those debates respectfully.
Exactly.
That sounds so different from what's happening now.
It does, but it's worth fighting for.
It's worth striving for.
It's the kind of environment where lawfare wouldn't be as effective.
Because it wouldn't have that distrust to feed off of.
Right. Rebuilding trust and civility makes it harder to weaponize the legal system.
So it's a lot of things. Being informed, holding our leaders accountable, supporting the judges, and rebuilding trust.
It's a lot, but it's not impossible.
It feels good to know there are things we can do.
It's empowering.
It's not a lost cause.
And remember, this deep dive, it's focused on one perspective.
Right. This one source.
There are other viewpoints out there.
We've got to consider all sides.
Do our own research, decide what we believe.
This source has given us a lot to think about.
It has.
But it's not the end of the conversation.
Keep learning, keep questioning, keep fighting for a better future.
Well said. This deep dive has been really eye-opening. We've covered a lot.
We have.
From defining lawfare to, how it's been used against Trump, how it affects the whole system, and what we can do about it.
It's been a journey.
It has, but I feel like I understand this whole thing so much better now.
Me too.
And I hope our listeners do too.
I hope so.
This is just the beginning,
It is.
Keep learning, keep questioning, keep fighting for a better future.
That's it.
And until next time, keep diving.
Keep diving.
In the heart of this nation, under skies so blue, there's a spirit that's stirring values strong and true. From the mountains to the prairies, from the cities to the sea, we stand for liberty, for faith and family. We're diving deep into the heart of what we believe. Conservative values in our souls, they're interweaved. With courage and with honor, we'll hold our ground. For freedom, for tradition, in this land we found. Our Constitution, the words that set us free, the right to bear arms, to speak and to agree. We honor our forefathers who fought with steadfast might for the dream of a nation shining bright in the night. In every town and village, in every heart and home, we'll uphold our principles. Together we'll